Welcome back to The Mature Male. Today we are talking about values, action, and how those can align. We'll be diving into what it means to live an integrated life. And the reason why this matters is living in alignment with our values creates a sense of fulfillment, clarity, and integration. We'll also be talking about decision making and how that happens and what the word decide really means, and going through some different use cases of how to go about making a decision that may be helpful. This episode will be practical. If you want to follow along, I'll be providing exercises throughout it based on the therapy framework Acceptance Commitment Therapy, or ACT, which helps us move towards a meaningful life, even in the face of discomfort or obstacles. So let's dive in. Section 1 is identifying your core values. Now, you can have a list of core values from this website here, which I will put in the show notes. And this is by no means a full list of values, but it is comprehensive and a good place to start. Let's start with talking about the difference between values and goals. Values are ongoing. They are similar to subjects like finance. Values, an example is loyalty. There's not a point where you are loyal enough. A value is an embodied spirit. It's a core element of what you care most about in life. It's something that drives the decisions that you make. A goal is something that is outcome based. It's achievable, it's measurable, it's formulated, and it's temporary. Like to save a certain amount of money. That's a financial goal. Finance is the topic. For the value, saving the money is the goal. And oftentimes when we make decisions, it's easy to make those decisions out of goals. So sticking with the financial situation, you may aim to make a certain amount this year, and that's what you say you care most about. It's why you make the decisions you make. You cook instead of going out to eat. You save money instead of spend it on useless things. But once you achieve that goal, you're no longer motivated to continue to do something. It's also like losing weight instead of learning to be a healthy person. We'll dive more into that, but it's important that you clarify your values before taking action more than your goals. Our first guided reflection here, a question for you: what truly matters in your life? Referencing this list of core values in the show notes. Is it relationships, career, health, personal growth, family, integrity, openness? And you're going to have a feeling of associating with all the values. I mean, hopefully you have a value for all these common values, but you should have no more than 5 core values. These are the ones that drive most of your decisions. They are the ones that mean the most to you. They can't all mean the most to you because then there's no hierarchy. So take a look at the list right now. Name 5 of the top values that are driving most of your decisions, and think about where those come from. Were they instilled to you as a child from your family? Was it a particular environment you were in? For instance, I used to live in New York City. It's very common for people there to value their career and not value their family. They would rather spend time working until 9 p.m., making 6 figures and going out for drinks than coming home to their family. Of course, there are families in New York, and there are people in cities that aren't as busy who work a lot. But that is just a simple example of an environment that informs a value that you express. Maybe it's your friends and people around you, or maybe it's just someone that you look up to, a mentor. And that leads me to the second part of this reflection, asking yourself, who do you admire and why? Essentially, who do you want to be like? Who embodies these values that you listed? And could and should be multiple people. I think about in my life, I have a mentor who exudes peace and generosity, not perfectly, but close. I really look up to him. He is someone that I want to be like. He is actively living out those values. Third question in the guided reflection, ask yourself, when have you felt most fulfilled? This is diving into something we'll get to in a bit on aspirational versus lived values. There are times we express certain values because our parents tell us to, maybe our boss, we feel pressured by those around us, but it doesn't make us feel alive. Those values don't bring out this sense of hope and joy and life-giving energy. But which values do? And maybe they do. Just because you were made to do them doesn't mean you don't strongly correlate with them. An example is my wife grew up in an Italian-American family. They have a high value for loyalty and family. They express that deeply, and she embodies that as well. That's something she has taken on as her own. A value for me is open-mindedness. If I reflect back on a lot of my decisions, they come from being open to a new way of seeing or thinking. I'm always exploring new modalities and authors and principles and mindsets because I want to stay open-minded. Then the last question here is, what are some common challenges in identifying your values? You may have the list up, you may be going through, you say, Wes, it's tough to pick 5. Ask yourself, is it any external expectation? Is there anyone whose voice is loud in your head and you feel indebted to them to express or not express certain values? Do you have a fear of change? Have you always been known as this kind of person? What would it look like to let go of being that person? The final exercise here in this reflective section is the acceptance commitment therapy tool called Values Clarification Exercise. What you're going to do is you have those top 5 values that you have named, and you are going to reflect on whether your actions align with the values. So if a value is family, how often are you seeing family? Or how often are you calling them, checking in? And you're going to go through that exercise for each of the 5 values. It's going to be difficult, but you should be honest with yourself that it may very well be the case that you are not actively actionizing the values that you say you care most about. That's a humbling place to get to, but it's the start. Then you can address the barriers to getting in the way. Which leads me to our second part, which is how we make decisions with integrity. Values-based decisions create inner peace and long-term satisfaction. There's a difference between impulsive decisions and values-driven decisions. We'll get into the ACT concept of diffusion, which is not getting hooked by thoughts that pull us away from values. So why do decisions based on values bring us inner peace and long-term satisfaction? Inner peace. It's having this sense of contentment with yourself and your life that you live. It's having a sense of stability and groundedness within you. And that comes from making a values-based decision because your values are also core to who you are. You should see your core values as the most stable, consistent expression of who you are. When you make decisions out of those values, the correlation and the consequence is inner peace because stability reaps stability. Groundedness reaps groundedness. You can have a deep sense of trust that you are acting in the world in a way that is most authentic to who you are as a person. When you do that every day, it brings the second point of long-term satisfaction. You'll find we're going to go through this framework of immediate gratification, long-term satisfaction, as well as inner peace and tranquility and chaos and disorder, and how these all stem from making a decision out of impulse or values. We live in a world that is constantly telling us what we should care about, what we should buy, who we should be with, what we should think. And this ACT concept of diffusion helps us not get hooked by thoughts that pull us away from our values. I'm going to give you an example and we're going to talk through how this applies. Let's say you have a job and you have a tough decision. You're choosing between a high paying role that's misaligned with your values versus a lower paying role, but it's fulfilling. We call this the golden handcuffs. So how do you decide what to do? On one hand, you want money to be able to live the life that you want, and it helps you move towards your goals, but it's eating you up inside. There's something in you that feels like it's degrading. If you get a lower paying role, you'll be more financially stressed. Day to day, you'll worry more, but maybe it's a subject that you deeply care about, that you have a lot of meaning in. So how do we make this decision? The word decide, this comes from the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Highly recommend reading. The word decision is less a noun than it is a verb. Yes, it is a noun in that we make a decision. That is a finalized state of a subject. But it is more so something we do. It's an action. And that word decide, the Latin root, DEC, deci, means to cut away. The word decimate, decibel. It's to put a finality to something. And this is important to know because when we're making a decision, we are overwhelmingly cutting out what we're not doing more than we are keeping what we are doing. Every decision, the yes that we make, has 1,000 no's associated with it. And it's important we ask ourselves how willing we are to make this decision. We look at the willingness through a sense of cost. What is the level of cost I'm willing to pay to make this decision? Easy example with Olympic athletes. They are training their entire lives, 15, 20 years sometimes, almost daily, for a chance at, on average, a 5-minute or less event on the world's biggest stage. The amount of cost associated with that, 20 years of nonstop effort, because the yes to becoming an Olympian and participating in the games is worth it. On a much smaller level, we're going to walk through this decision and deciding whether to stay in this job or not. We first have to pause, then we reflect, and then we align. So we have to pause because oftentimes when we're presented with a decision that we have to make, emotions are the first thing to be expressed, whether it's fear or anxiety, which are correlated, anger, sadness, excitement. So we have to pause, let the dust settle, let those emotions settle in. We name them. We can't ignore them. Then we reflect. And the way that we reflect is using this values to action, where we list the core values for staying in the high paying job and the cost of doing so. Then we do that for the low paying job and the cost of doing so. And we reflect on which values mean the most to us. We stay on track by not getting hooked by those thoughts and those feelings that pull us away from the values. In this example, it's easy to have a sense of greed regarding getting paid a lot of money. And we pay attention to that greed or that desire to say, it'll be justified because I make a certain amount, so I won't feel the pains of not connecting with this job because I'll be making a ton of money. On the other side, we can easily get drawn in by anxiety. We think, well, if I pick this low paying job, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to achieve my financial goals? We start freaking out and go into fight or flight. We don't allow ourselves to make that decision out of a clear mind. As you're doing this, just know you're constantly going to be bombarded by distractions. You want to diffuse those and stay focused on the value. It's like if you ever watch a football game, any good quarterback, amidst being blitzed and having players try to tackle him, will stay grounded and focused on the goal, which is to throw the ball to the receiver. And those who can be most calm, grounded, and focused are the ones that are the best. Oftentimes, when things start coming at us, we freak out, throw the ball away, we get sacked, meaning we get overwhelmed by them. I'm not trying to do the whole coach thing, like, all right, here's a life lesson. You need to listen up, boys. But I think it is a good example. The third step in the decision-making tip after you pause and reflect is to align. Asking this question, does this choice bring me closer to or further from my values? Going through each role and asking that difficult question. Yes, this example is over a job, which is a bigger life decision, but it can be a small one in what you're doing this week, your social plans. Every day you wake up, you are making hundreds of decisions. You are cutting out hundreds of things and saying yes to a few things. How are you going about making those decisions? The more you practice this, the more you realize what aligns and doesn't align with who you are. When you first do this, it will probably feel confusing, frustrating even, because it's hard to pick. That's okay. Just pick. Go for it. Try it out. The point is that you are actively participating in reflecting and refining the person you are becoming in a way where your actions reflect that. Segment 3 is living out your values consistency. Why consistency matters. This is where we're going to jump into the topic of integration. That word integration is the same root as the word integrity. A definition of integrity that I like is that the person that you say you are, the person you communicate yourself as to the world, the person others think you are, the perception of others about who you are, and who you actually are. All those three align. They are the same person. To have integrity is not simply to just do the right thing. It's to be a whole integrated person. Carl Jung talks about every human has a shadow side, the part of them they are most ashamed of, that is sinful, that is dark, that is looming in the depths. That's the part we don't want anyone to see. He says if we try to hide it and suppress it, it comes out more violently and more obtrusively in a way that's not integrated. He says what we need to do instead is to integrate the shadow part, come to accept it. Acceptance is not enablement, but we have to acknowledge those parts of us we least want to accept. That is part of how we make decisions. I grew up living a very aspirational life, meaning the way I perceive life was out of aspiration. We're going to talk about aspirational and lived values and how that relates to integrity. To have aspirations is to aspire to do something. It's a theory. It's idealized. It's constructed in your mind as a vision, but it has not played out in reality as real. It's in your head. It's good to have aspirations. It means you want to aim for things, that you would have goals, like what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. But ultimately, if there's no action behind these aspirations, it's fluff. It's empty. It's void. The action embodies and gives life, value, and validity to the aspirations. I would aspire to be a reader. I would tell people I love to read. Big bookworm. Never picked up a book. I would say I value my health, and I would go eat like shit. Aspirational. And many of us reward ourselves with having aspirational values. I aspire to care about this, so therefore I care about it. So therefore I do not have to make any concerted effort to live it out because I already care about it. And you should respect that I care about it. But what you care most about, you actually do. I have a son. He's almost a year old. Imagine if I said, I aspirationally care about him, so that means I actually care. No, I have to show actions of feeding him, clothing him, changing him, and soothing him, giving him my time and attention in how I express my life. I spend many actions a week taking care of him because he means the most to me. I have a value for him that is above almost anything else. So ask yourself, of what I care most about, Are those aspirational values? Are those lived values? Lived values are actionized values. They're ones that you're actually embodying, that you're currently doing. Simple exercise to see this is to look at your schedule. Ask if your values are actively being expressed in your schedule. Because if you care about your time, you'll have a schedule. Your schedule reflects what you do. What you do is a reflection of what you care most about. This is a humbling exercise because you may think that you care about all these things, but you really don't. And that can be freeing to finally admit that, because there's no one over your shoulder. You need to care about this. If you don't, then bad things will happen. You have to release that pressure and allow yourself to face the truth. If I currently say that I care about something and I'm not living it out, it's an aspirational value. It's only one of two options. Either one, I really don't care about it as much as I say, and I need to come to terms with that. Or two, I need to find a pragmatic way to express the value. I need to time block. I need accountability. I need to think through and prepare how this value can be expressed. And our process to humbly move from aspiration to live is authenticity played out, is integrity. It's moving from the person who you say you are, who you aspire to be, who you idealize in your head to be, to the person you live out day to day, the person you actually are. It's more humble to not share aspirationally and to live expressing the person that you are. It's way easier to talk about change. It's a lot harder to change. We'll use this ACT concept called committed action. Committed action is taking meaningful steps towards values even when it's uncomfortable. The first step, deciding what values are aspirational, what are lived. The second step, how can I actually live those values and decide which ones I want to and which ones I want to let go of. But as you move towards expressing the values, you are going to run into barriers, discomfort, suffering, and setbacks. So what do? The reason why we started with the core values and what means the most to you is because you need meaning to motivate you. When things get difficult, you need something to keep you going. Any beginning change starts with a honeymoon phase. I often fall into this trap. Recently, it was about health. I read a book on health. I threw out all the bad things with toxins and plastics. My wife really got upset at me, understandably. It was easy to do that because I was motivated. It was the very beginning. But then I started getting faced with, okay, we're traveling. We're going out to eat. Do I get this that's cooked in this kind of oil that's not great for me? Do I drink this beer that looks really good because everyone else is? Do I order this dessert that looks really yummy? And I caved because I got uncomfortable, because I forgot the meaning of the change I was trying to make, which is to be a healthier person, avoid certain oils, eat whole foods, minimize my alcohol intake, not eat a lot of added sugar. All that went right out the window when that stuff was in front of me, because I would rather seek comfort than discomfort. Like the rest, all of us. You need the meaning to motivate you to stay committed in your action. Think about it. If you are married, you stay committed to that one person. You have enough meaning that keeps you monogamous, is one way to see it. So how can you be committed or monogamous to the change that you want to make in your life, that you aren't unfaithful by giving into distractions, succumbing to unhealthy desires that do not align with your values? Well, let's talk about strategies for how you're going to stay on track and stay committed even when you're uncomfortable. Some of this comes from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. The first one is habit stacking. You want to link small daily actions to values. So if you want to eat healthier, then after you remove all the packaged and overly processed foods from your house, maybe the next day you buy a blender to make a smoothie, or you remove a mixing bowl that you use for baking cookies. And then the next day you put together a core list of items in the grocery store that you're going to get. Then the next day you tell someone about your plan and ask them to check in on you when you go grocery shopping. Make sure you don't bring anything that's not on that list. Every day you're making a small step towards expressing the value. Instead of trying to do it all at once and getting overwhelmed, or not starting at all because you feel like you have to do it all at once, take step by step. The second is to have self-compassion when you slip up. Now, I'm preaching to the choir here because I'm really bad about being hard on myself. It's important to realize the human condition is unfaithful in nature, hypocritical by default. We constantly talk about doing one thing, saying one thing, and then doing another, saying another. You will have setbacks. You will be imperfect in this process. But how you love yourself and treat yourself when you slip up determines how you continue to progress. The whole point of having core values is because that word value most applies to who you are as a person. The more you see yourself as valuable, the more you will take seriously expressing the core values that reflect that value you have for yourself in an integrated and holistic manner in the world. So don't beat yourself up because punishment never helped anyone grow. Have compassion. The next tip for staying on track is use mindfulness to stay present and intentional. If you are trying to make an effort to change eating healthy, when you're at the grocery store and you go down the snack aisle, check in with yourself. How am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling anxious or excited that I want to buy this, and it's just one little snack, and you start talking yourself out of the change you're trying to make. Slow down. Whoa, 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 whoa. Do some meditation there on aisle 5. Take some deep breaths. Remind yourself, Wes, you don't really need this. This does not align with your goals. Return to the intent you initially had. Take that cart and you keep going right past the snack aisle. And you go back to the Whole Foods aisle. That is an example of how to use these strategies. So to recap our conversation today, the first step is identifying the core values. What most makes up who you are as a person? What values most embody that feel true to who you are? Look at that list, go through, define your core values. Then start to use your values as a guide for decision making. First, reflect on what values are currently driving your decisions. Remember that decisions are more about cutting off than they are keeping. So what's your opportunity cost for every decision that you're making? Reflect on your current state of decision making, and then look at your current values and change your framework for how you're going to start making decisions moving forward. Take small, consistent actions that reflect those values instead of getting overwhelmed and seeing it as this massive undertaking. Have the value, then break it down. What does it look like to take small, consistent actions daily to align with this? Time block on your calendar and work towards reflecting those values. And then lastly, do the aspirational versus lived exercise where you see what you say you care about and what you actually care about and how that is reflected in your decisions and your actions. I invite you to do these exercises and share your thoughts. Let me know how it goes. Is it actually helpful? So thanks for tuning in today. I encourage you to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more insights. I'm going to sign off here with a quote from Carl Jung. He says, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." See you next time.